Okay, good morning everybody. We're doing another vocabulary class and today it's comparing and contrasting. So lots of words with to compare and to contrast. And I know I'm going to start straight away with the idea that I know you can compare something with or compare something to. And so both of those prepositions are possible with the verb compare. And you do feel like there's a slight difference between the two of them. And the difference is when you compare X to Y, you're pointing out a likeness, some kind of similarity. Whereas when you compare X with Y, you could be pointing out similarities and differences. So it's more general, but very often either preposition is acceptable. Okay, so let's have a look. X and Y look, appear, are, seem, become remarkably, strikingly, vaguely similar. So I'm trying to give you some adverbs that work with similar, and these work very well. And of course, remarkably and strikingly mean very similar. Vaguely means slightly similar. Yeah, remember this word vague, when it's not clear, it's vague. So vaguely similar. And notice that all of these are copular verbs, and that's because we need a copular verb when we use an adjective. Yeah, I am hot. Only copular verbs will allow an adjective as the subject complement. So that's why they're all copular verbs. Okay, we also have bear little resemblance to something, bear a faint resemblance to something, bear a striking resemblance to something. And again, a little resemblance, a faint resemblance. These two mean slight, yeah? These mean a little bit similar, yeah? So if your uncle bears a faint resemblance to you, that means that he looks a little bit like you, but not very much like you. If he bears a striking resemblance to you, that means he looks exactly like you, okay? So all of those are good, and we use this word resemblance when two things look the same. So that is particularly about appearance, okay? And we would use it as X bears little resemblance to Y. Okay, what about X is altogether different from Y? Yeah, this altogether different means completely different, entirely different, fundamentally different, or radically different. And all of those adverbs work very well with different. Yeah, they collocate well with that adjective different. And it's the preposition from with different. With similar, it's always to. Yeah, X is remarkably similar to Y. Or X and Y are remarkably similar. But yeah, it's similar to, and it's resemblance to. And I told you earlier, compare X to Y is about similarities, it's about likenesses. And so the to preposition seems to be for similar things, whereas from seems to be for different things. Okay, you can draw a contrast between X and Y, or you can make a contrast between X and Y. And this is where you want to contrast two different things, yeah? When you want to show their differences. When you're contrasting, you're showing differences and not similarities, yeah? You can say that X stands in marked contrast to Y. For example, the results of this poll, of this survey, stand in marked contrast to our expectations. And so what actually happened stands in marked contrast to what we expected to happen, yeah? And so you can certainly use this verb, stand in marked contrast. Stark contrast is excellent as well, and it means extreme contrast. And sharp works very well with contrast too. So if you want to say two things are completely different, you can say X stands in sharp contrast to Y. And certainly very often, I think, if you're a scientist, results are very often surprising. And so you can say the results stand in marked contrast or stark contrast to our expectations. Okay, you can also draw and make again. Yeah, remember it was draw and make here. Draw and make a fair comparison. So contrast and comparison take the same verbs. You can draw a fair comparison between X and Y, or a favourable one, or a useful one, or an impartial one. And all of those work with comparison. So a fair comparison, yeah, you're being fair, yeah, when you make that comparison. Favourable comparison is when you compare two things, and quite often you compare two things to see which is the best. And so you might say X compares favourably with Y. And that means that if when you compare the two of them, X looks better. Yeah. Of course, you might say Y compares favourably with X, in which case Y compares better. Yeah, that's the idea, that when you compare two things and you say that X compares favourably, yeah, then it means that X looks better than Y. Okay, so you can say, oh, and by the way, impartial is objective. It means not biased. Yeah, we've had this word biased a few times on this course, and if you are biased, you are unfairly influenced. But an impartial comparison is neutral, objective comparison, yeah? And so, of course, really, if you're a scientist or something like that, you want to make impartial comparisons, fair comparisons, yeah? You don't want to be biased, because that would be unfair. And you can make an unfair comparison, of course, as well. Okay, a few other expressions. This restaurant can bear comparison with the best in the world. So if you can bear or can stand comparison with, and you can just say this restaurant compares with the best in the world, you can. But this is more common, and it means that this restaurant is right there it's among the best restaurants in the world. It's just as good as the best in the world. It can be compared with the best in the world, okay? And that's why we can say this restaurant can bear comparison. So it's very positive. It means this restaurant really is a tremendous restaurant. We also say this, we say X bears no comparison with Y, yeah, and that means you can't compare X to Y because Y is so much better, yeah. And so we might say something like this. Let me think of a concrete example. So my football team at Southend United bears no comparison with Manchester United, yeah. We're way down the tables. We're not. I'm not a football fan anyway. I don't go and watch them, but I did play football a lot as a youngster, and I certainly know that Southend United bears no comparison with Manchester United. Yeah, or I could say Southend and Manchester don't bear comparison. And another one I can use, this pale in comparison with, or fade in comparison with, I could say Southend United football team pales in comparison with Manchester United football team. And I mean that when you compare the two, Southend is pale and Manchester is bright. Yeah, that's the idea with this fade and pale. When something fades, it loses colour. When something pales, it loses colour. And so if you say their last album pales in comparison with their early work, you're saying that their last album was rubbish. And when you compare it to their early albums, it fades. It's not so bright. It looks rubbish. Yeah. And so this to pale in comparison with is very good for making comparisons. Okay, here are some more, guys, some more verbs. To emphasize, highlight considerable or vast or substantial differences between X and Y. Yeah, and by the way, if you're going to say two different nouns, you need between and the and, yeah, between X and Y. But sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want to emphasize considerable difference